voice.
All right, go ahead.
Football for 20 years.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yep.
Yes, sir, go, sir. Anything
Drop
else
it,
I can do for you?
drop it, give you.
Welcome everyone to tonight's ATD of the Bluegrass meeting. I just love to say that it rolls off the lips, ATD of the Bluegrass. So welcome tonight. We have a new person here tonight, and we have, of course, Erin Mires, who I'm really looking forward to her presentation tonight. But yeah, welcome tonight, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it. And our official introducer just walked in the room. Hello. And they've got the camera on, by the way, so you could have been on camera. But anyway, so welcome tonight. We're going to have some fun tonight. And I'd like to introduce Erin Mires, who is going to talk about valuing diversity.
Thank you.
I should have waited 2 minutes.
Telling you, that was a strategic entry. She knew there was going to be filming. Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Roger. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I am Erin Mires, and of course, I'm going to be talking about valuing diversity and talent development. But I'm going to start off just by giving you a little bit of background about myself, because some of you probably have automatically put some inherent bias in when you look at me standing up here. You have some stereotypes about who should be standing up here, and it's probably not this little petite white girl who looks like they're about 20, right? I mean, that's just the case. It is. We all have those, and we're going to talk more in depth about bias and stereotypes here in just a minute. So the reason why I'm passionate about diversity and why I love it, not only do I have my PhD in organization development and leadership, a large component of that is diversity, but I also grew up as an expatriate brat. So I grew up overseas. I was born in Egypt to 2 Wisconsin native parents, and we ended up moving every 2 to 3 years. Sometimes we were in one place for 6 years. That was a rare occurrence, but we moved all over the world, and I got to experience a bunch of different cultures in my youth, a lot of different languages, different types of people, different religions, and I really loved that. I would be asking my dad when we were moving again. I loved that. My sister, on the other hand, was a homebody, and she would cry every time my dad said that we were going to be moving again. And then there was me on the other side of the spectrum. So I really enjoyed that. I learned to adapt really quickly to different types of environments. And I will tell you, I moved back to the States my senior year of college to a small itty-bitty town in northern Wisconsin called Eagle River, Wisconsin. Population 1,100, and it's in the middle of nowhere. Nowhere. There's no diversity there, right? I mean, everybody looks exactly the same. In fact, they all look just like me. But that was the first time in my life that I experienced true culture shock. It was rough. It was really rough. I didn't understand anybody. I didn't feel like I had anything in common with anybody. It was a totally different experience. I even had someone come up to me and say, Erin, I have no idea what you're saying. I literally do not understand the words coming out of your mouth, because I just had a different vocabulary. I had different vernacular, I had different, regional colloquialisms that I spoke than these individuals did. And there's nothing wrong with who they were and who I was. It's just that we had different upbringings. We were from different backgrounds, different cultures, really. And so that moment is when I really began to be interested in learning how people's minds work, how diversity shapes us, how experiences shape us. So I ended up going and getting my bachelor's in international studies. Go figure, right? Fall back on what you know. And then I expanded on that with a master's in human relations, more focusing on the psychological components in the workplace. And then I really further defined that by getting my PhD in organization development and leadership. And my dissertation was on managing misrecognition in multilingual organizations. So a really focused diversity topic. And that's really where my passion comes in, is from that diversity. So that gives you an idea of why I'm passionate about the subject and what I've done to experience and continue to learn on the topic of diversity.
And where was your PhD from?
The University of the Rockies.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yep, it's a small behavioral sciences only, graduate-only institution in Colorado. So not a lot of people have heard of it, but it was one of... Yeah, I know, Roger has, go figure, he's in education. But yeah, it was one of 2 institutions at the time, universities at the time, that offered it specifically in organization development. I took a master's class in OD and just fell in love with it and knew that that's what I wanted to continue focusing on. All right. So the learning objectives you saw on the speaker flyer, but I'll just cover them really quickly. We're going to go over the basic components of diversity, because you can't really talk about diversity unless you define what the speaker means by diversity. Then we're going to talk about misrecognition. I mentioned that very briefly. We're going to identify how to minimize the negative effects of diversity, because there are negative effects. No matter what, there are always going to be negative effects of diversity. But we're also you're going to leave here, hopefully, with some very effective tools to help you minimize those negative effects and really help amplify the positive effects of diversity in an organization. All right, so what is diversity? So the Society of Human Resource Management, I'm going to read their definition of diversity to you. And there are some components of this definition that I really like, and there are some that I don't. So that's why I'm going to read it to you, and we're going to kind of go in depth about it. So SHRM says that diversity refers to the differences based on ethnicity, gender, age, religion, disability, national origin, and sexual orientation, as well as an infinite range of unique characteristics, experiences, communication styles, physical characteristics, and speed of learning and comprehension. So I read that to you because the first part of that has very finite components of diversity. You've got gender, age, race, etc. All of those stereotypical components of diversity that we usually think of when we hear the term diversity. And that I don't like about the definition, because it puts diversity in this little box. And I really feel like diversity doesn't belong in a box. It's a much larger, broader term that we should all be recognizing and adapting, specifically in the workplace. Because in the second part, it goes into a little bit more, it opens up a little bit more by saying these infinite possibilities, right? These infinite characteristics. And that's a little bit more appropriate, because it's not just age, gender, race. It is also how we grew up, our cultural experiences, and maybe the community in which we grew up in. There's all sorts of different components to diversity. And when you put diversity in a box, what you're doing is you're actually isolating people. Because someone may feel that they're really different than someone else, but if they don't fall into the definition of diversity, they may not feel like they can go and receive the benefits of a diversity program that you may have at your organization. They may not feel like they can report some inappropriate activity because they don't fall neatly into that little box. And there's always something that each and every one of us feel like we don't fall into the box and definition of. So what the definition I like to use is Marilyn Logan. She is a very specialized and nationally recognized organizational change consultant. And I know that next week you're going to be talking about organizational change, so maybe she'll come up again. But what her definition is much broader, and it really breaks those boundaries. It's important human characteristics that impact individuals' values, opportunities, and perceptions of self and others at work. So really, again, focusing on diversity in the organization. So I like that. That is the type of definition that we should have in the workplace. I'll give Frankie a moment to write that down.
No.
You're good? Okay.
So if you put a period after others, it would be a nice statement about diversity in general.
In general, absolutely. I'm talking specifically about organizational diversity, but you're right. Take out at work, just general diversity. Great point, Roger. So let's break diversity down a little bit further. So this is the 4 layers of diversity. And this was created by Anita Rowe and Lee Garden Swartz. And they're human resource experts. And they agree with Logan's definition of diversity. But what they've done is they have expanded it a little bit further. And I love this because I'm a very visual person. So it gives us that visual representation of diversity. And it expands in 2 ways. It adds the personality, and it also adds the organizational dimensions that Logan didn't necessarily mention in her definition. So you'll see personality in the center ring. And that really is at the center and kind of stands out for a reason. Because personality is what makes each of us unique. We could sit here and we could discuss and we could probably find at least 5, probably more, similarities between all of us in this room on here. But personality, there's no one else like us. So personality supersedes all the other dimensions. Then we move into the internal dimensions. This goes back to kind of the stereotypical definition of diversity that we usually hear about, the age, race, gender, etc., sexual orientation, disabilities, physical disabilities. Then the external dimensions, we go into marital status, parental status, your recreational habits, your religion. You could almost even add in there politics, right? Those things we don't like to talk about when you're sitting down with someone for a first date or meeting someone for the first time or sitting in an interview. And then if we move on to the organizational dimensions, we add those diversity components that really relate specifically to the workplace. Do you belong to a union? Are you a non-union worker? What department are you in? And that's really important because departments can have their own unique identity. Very, very different identities. And work location, seniority, etc.
Sort of interesting that when you're on the inner ring, the first thing is sight. You see someone and you want to pigeonhole them into different categories. So I can easily see someone's gender, instantly, and have this instant preconceived notion, be able to pigeonhole that away.
Absolutely.
But when you start to get into geographic location or whatever, I can't tell, just looking at someone right away. Of course, if someone dresses differently, of that nature, but it becomes more and more nuanced the further out you get. I don't know if that's right or not.
That's great, yes, absolutely. It definitely
Those
does.
internal dimensions seem to be the first part of the definition that the Sherman
It is, exactly. The first part of that definition that Sherm gave. Which is why, as I stated before, I don't really like it, minus the infinite possibilities that they decided to tag on at the end, right? Because there really are so many other components. And it is. Diversity is very, very nuanced. You have to dig deep sometimes to find those differences. Yet, those differences may really be at the heart of someone's personality. Right? So the effect of diversity on an organization. And I'm talking here about the positive effect, right? Diversity can have a huge positive effect on an organization. There's lots and lots of research that says that diversity spurs creativity and innovation. If you have a really diverse team of individuals that come from a lot of different backgrounds, maybe they're interdepartmental, etc. You're laughing over here. Do you experience those?
That's how I build teams.
Yay! Good! So people of different backgrounds and experiences, of different diversity levels, of different individual diversity, which is really what the 4 layers describes, is our individual diversity. You really push each other to think outside the box. And when people think in different ways, you get really creative solutions. And you end up with an extremely innovative organization. So we all want to be innovative organizations now, right? I mean, we buy a phone and it's out of date. Could be brand new. Could have been just released. You stood in line for 12 hours at the Apple store, right? But Apple's already got something else that they're releasing in 2 months. So you want to be innovative in this day and age, especially with the technology that's going on. And diversity is a great way to do that. It also directly relates to positive work experiences. The greater the diversity of an organization, the more positive the employees' work experiences. A lot of research out there to back that. And a lot of that has to do with that teamwork and feeling comfortable in their own skin in the workplace. And that relates as well to the effective organizational culture. So if you have strong diversity, you tend to have an effective organizational culture, really for the reasons listed above. Because of that, you have higher recruiting and retention. A lot of individuals have a very specific stereotype of the certain types of people that hold positions, specific positions, and work at particular companies. You have one stereotype of someone that works at Google, for example, versus someone that works at a bank. Very, very, very different organizational cultures in general. And so you have a different stereotype of the person that might work there. But if you see a very diverse person that doesn't meet that stereotype, that works at an organization and is successful and loves working at that organization, all of a sudden you think, well, shoot, if he can do it, I can do it, right? And you start really diversifying your candidate pool and finding a lot better candidates to fill positions. And with that comes higher retention. So all of these all are interrelated. And with all of that, you then become an employer of choice. So talk about having a diverse candidate pool, right? I bet Google has some amazingly talented individuals that apply they probably have thousands, hundreds of thousands on a daily basis of incredibly talented individuals applying. And finally, efficient communication. So lots and lots of studies, and this actually came from my own research as well. It was one of the outcomes of my own research, that a diverse organization tends to have much more efficient communication. And the reason for that is that individuals who have exposure to different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences, tend to also know how to communicate to larger types of audiences. They know how to speak interdepartmentally. They know how to speak to various levels of the organizational hierarchy. And so efficient communication just becomes natural. All right, we talked about the positives. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the negatives, and this is where we're going to spend the majority of our time. Because hopefully, by recognizing the negatives, you'll leave here not only with more awareness, but also some effective tools to help minimize the negatives and help those positives. So what does a CEO look like?
6'4", tall, dark, and handsome.
There you go. All right.
Big man theory.
Big man theory. And that's coming from a not quite 6'4" person, right?
Right, absolutely. But,
Right.
but 35 years at GE, that's exactly what it was. Until about the last 10 years I was there.
So
Marissa, yeah.
25 years?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Meg Whitmer is
I think it's something like that. So we have CEOs of all the manufacturing plants now that don't look like me.
So 6'4", tall, dark, handsome, with 25 years of GE. That's what Roger was saying. Yep. And what were you saying?
It's not like that now.
In tech, it's
Right.
totally different. So you have it all the way across the board. I mean, Meg Whitmer was
right.
the CEO for a long time, and she was the CEO of eBay. And then you've got like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's in a hoodie.
Right.
And much younger than what you normally see. We have an Australian guy who's a bit older, not your younger, suave-looking guy who's our HBCU now. So it's
Perfect. Great examples. Yeah, the definition or the stereotype of a CEO has changed drastically. Thank goodness, right? Because there's probably a lot more qualified individuals. There's still a study out there, however, that Malcolm Gladwell did. How many of us are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell? Yeah. Yeah. So if you read his book Blink, you've probably heard this information.
yes.
Blink. Yes, Blink.
Gotcha.
Yep. Great book if you haven't read it. Highly recommend it. It's on Audible if you just want to use it during or listen to it during your commute. That's what I do. Yeah. So,
But yeah, you made a comment before that you eliminate so many possibilities of getting good people in if you stereotype that big man.
you do.
Especially male, female, you're eliminating half the population.
You are.
Oh,
Right. If you have to have a male CEO, 50% of your candidate pool goes away. Yeah, and especially as the Caucasian population becomes the minority, I mean, very quickly, within the next 5 or 6 years, Caucasians will be the minority in the United States.
Well, this was a famous thing that when I was auditioning for the Philharmonic, when they finally went ahead and they had the partition, and you couldn't tell if they were male or female, all of a sudden it went like 50-50. So if they would only hire CEOs the same way.
Exactly. And the story he's referring to, for those of you that don't know, the first female actually auditioned behind a curtain and was selected for the Philharmonic. So that was a big deal. Okay, so going back to the statistics about the CEO. So less than 15% of American men are over 6 feet. And that actually was shocking to me. I thought it would be more than that. But less than 15% of American men are over 6 feet tall.
I don't feel so short now.
Right? Yeah. Less than 4% are over 6'2". more. Do we have anyone over 6'2" in here? No. Yeah. But nearly 60% of corporate CEOs still are over 6 feet tall. So we're not even talking male or female here. We're not talking race. We're not talking age. We're just talking stature. 60% of CEOs are over 6 feet tall. And more than 36% are over 6'2". Yeah.
Well, I thought that Big Bang Theory had gone away. I don't guess it has.
It may have decreased.
Yeah.
But it
could-
hasn't
probably
disappeared.
decreased, yeah.
Yep.
And that holds true for salary as well.
I'm sure it will, yeah.
There you go. Great segue. So
There, oh, what a
what they
segue.
found, perfect transition. What they found, what Malcolm Gladwell found, was that 1 inch of height equates to $789 per year in salary. Right? I'm screwed. I'm 5'1". I happen to be in a little bit of heels
They
here.
get the power heels.
Right. But I really need to bump up those heel sizes. So $789 annual salary, just for 1 inch of height. Not even adding in the other diversity components. Yeah. So why? Why does this happen?
Assumptions.
Right.
I think it's a little bit
Preconceptions.
of the gene pool also, because who was the leader? The one that could kill the most animals or something, or whatever.
Okay, so
Because
you're
they
talking
were-
human
They were the most
evolution.
physical
Mhm.
part of the
Right.
tribe, so they were the natural leader. So it's kind of a little bit of we're fighting genes.
Stems a little bit from human evolution there, where the strongest survive. I heard assumptions, I heard hidden bias, the equivalent of it,
Maybe.
which is kind of what we're getting to. So really, it's bias. We have this hidden bias, inherent bias in us, this bias response that we do need someone. The only strong people that are capable of handling an organization are those that are big and strong, right? There's that kind of human evolution component in us, that only the fittest survive. It's still there. And so we have this inherent bias. And from that, Steve Elder said, it just became standard. Tall CEOs are what we have. And so whether they realized it or not, they just continued and continued to hire them. So let's talk a little bit more about bias and stereotypes. So what's the difference between a bias and a stereotype? It's okay, you don't have to know, that's why I'm here. Okay, so a stereotype is an exaggerated belief or fixed idea about a person or group that is held by people and sustained by selective perception and selective forgetting. Okay, a lot of fancy words. Really what it means is we hold these fixed ideas and thoughts about a type of person or a group of people. And we forget anybody that we may encounter that doesn't fit in that category. And we clearly remember those that do fit into that box. And so it only perpetuates that cycle. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about kind of that psychological effect in just a moment, how we use our perceptive lens to filter things out. But that's
So you
really...
think, like an
Uh-oh.
No,
Okay.
it's back.
An ethnic group would have a certain stereotype.
An ethnic group has a certain stereotype, exactly. So what types of stereotypes do we know? Have we heard? Not necessarily what we believe, just what we hear. White men can't dance. Asian women are bad drivers. Right? Right? These are stereotypes. I mean, I actually had an entire lesson when I was teaching at Brown Mackie College about stereotypes. And then, I mean, the students get really into it and they start shouting out all these stereotypes that they've heard. They're fascinating. And those are always the constants that I get. White men can't dance. Asian women can't drive. Hispanic men are, unfortunately, beat their significant others. It's one that I get very frequently, and it's really sad that I hear that, but one that continues to perpetuate itself. So, yep.
What I find interesting is when I'm approached myself with stereotypes that approaches me, they'll say something and then they'll realize that I'm Jewish and they'll say, oh, well, we're not talking about you. So it's like they'll make this broad
Just
statement, they'll make this broad
Mhm.
statement, but they're not talking about me.
Right, that excludes you.
Right.
That excludes you,
So it's
yeah.
like, and it's like, what an honor to be excluded.
So what's the Jewish stereotype? Because I get that one all the time too.
Jews are smart, Jews are cheap.
Jews are cheap. That's the one I always hear. Jews are cheap. Yep. Jews usually are smart. I'm trying to suck up.
We have a very diverse group in the area that I teach in at U of L. In fact, I'm probably a minority because we have Hindi, we've got, a number of different religions, all kinds of ethnic backgrounds. But we first got our first person that's of the Jewish religion, and we're there. But it's interesting. When Christmas time rolled around for the first time, he was the first one to wish me a Merry Christmas. I said, well, happy Hanukkah.
There you go. My parents actually live in Malaysia, and my father always gives everybody in the office a Christmas gift. It doesn't matter whether or not they are of the Christian religion. Everybody appreciates it, and everybody reciprocates on their holidays, during their holiday season as well. And so he actually gives the gifts to the younger children of some of his coworkers also. And there's this great one, thank you note that came back from one of the children that said, "Thank you, Grandpa Ken. We really loved the Christmas gift. We really hope that you have a fantastic Christmas and a happy New Year." And they're Muslim, Islamic, so completely broke that stereotype for a lot of people back here in the U.S. Because what's the big Muslim stereotype right now? That all Muslims are terrorists. Yep. But in fact, they loved their Christmas gifts, and they loved the fact that people cared enough about them, regardless. And the other side of it, they celebrate their religious holidays, and everybody rejoices in them, regardless of religion. All right. So bias. What is the difference between stereotype and bias then? Well, bias is a preconceived idea or attitude, either positive or negative, formed before the facts are known, usually comparing one thing, person, or group to another. So a stereotype is really more about people or a group of people, and it kind of just is this idea or concept that continues to perpetuate itself. Whereas bias, for example, I hate bananas, therefore I will not eat anything yellow, right? That's a bias, because there could be grapefruits that are yellow. Or just like little kids, you tried to make me eat Brussels sprouts and I hated them, therefore I'm not eating any green vegetable again, right? That's a bias. So that's kind of the difference there. It's this preconceived idea without knowing all the facts, when in fact they could love broccoli, and I could love mustard. I just don't know because I refuse to eat it, right? So that's the difference between the two. So what are some biases? This one's a little harder.
This kind of makes me think of a certain manager's attitude toward women in the workplace, and assuming that if a woman was passionate about something, she was being aggressive or emotional without really understanding what the nuances of that conversation were.
And that's a common stereotype. So that bias may come from the stereotype of women are always emotional. Yeah. Great.
So if a male had that very same conversation in the very same tone, he's showing good leadership.
Right.
I might have just experienced the bias myself, because when we were naming the stereotypes, I was hesitant to play along because I have this, I guess it would be a bias that if you say it, you might upset somebody. I'm trying to imagine if you're in a group of 50 people, and it is a diverse group, and you're expressing those stereotypes, I would be scared. I'd be like, somebody is going to go off here. So is that a bias?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And even in this
And it's true.
group here, I couldn't do it. I could think of 50, but I wasn't about to say any of them because I don't want to offend. I mean, seriously, that's my bias.
It's unfortunate.
I don't want to offend anybody.
It's a sensitive topic. It really is.
Yeah.
Diversity is a very sensitive topic. And that's why I try to be as open about it as possible, because you need to hear these things.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, I just need to sit in the back of the room by the door.
No, and then, I mean, it's a nice small group here, and so hopefully you feel more comfortable about talking about them now. But yeah, it's a sensitive topic, and it is going to probably offend someone. But honestly, what I've found is that the people who are offended are the people that need it the most.
Ah, interesting.
I think it's also interesting as either positive or negative, because I was going to say I wanted to play devil's advocate, flip it on the head and say, can a bias ever be a good thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. You keep making the transitions for me. It's awesome. All right. So bias as a necessity. We actually function on a daily basis because of bias. We do. So scientists estimate that we're exposed to 11 million different stimuli at any given moment. 11 million random things going on around us. Does anybody know how many of those our brain can actually process?
7.
Is it seven?
5, 7? Wow, those are actually a lot lower than I expected them to say. But
I was
close
wrong on how
in
you
general
take in
range
process
of,
information.
right, very close in the general range of 11 million to 0, right? It's 40. 40. Our brain can process 40 things at once, but we have 11 million going on. Right. So how do we text and drive, right?
We
How
don't.
we don't.
Yeah, we don't.
Exactly. We do not text and drive. Staring at the camera, right? But how do we walk down a busy street? While talking on our cell phone, while dodging people, while not tripping over ourselves, and while still finding our destinations. Somehow we manage to do it. And it's because we have filters. So our brain filters everything that it processes. And those filters are created because of our hidden biases. Hello. Oh, it's okay. Come on in. So we create those filters based on our experiences, our biases, our stereotypes, etc. So for example, has anybody purchased a new car recently? What did you buy?
On the pilot.
A Honda Pilot. That was so funny because when I practiced the speech, I actually used Honda Pilot as my example.
Did you see this presentation?
Actually, in another life.
Oh, yeah, seriously, you've given this presentation before. Right, so once you bought that Honda Pilot, or once you made that decision, how many more Honda Pilots were there on the road?
I became quite aware of more.
Mhm.
Actually, when I was in the mode of shopping, I became
Mhm.
aware of that. Same thing with bicycles, and for bicycles,
Right.
I'm aware. So, but you're right, I would filter those out normally, I wouldn't be looking at them.
The reticular activator, I think is what it's called.
There you go.
Yep.
There's a very
What
scientific
is
term, the
it?
reticular activator.
Yep.
So once we change our perception, our filter, all of a sudden we see a lot more cars that we're interested in. All of a sudden, everybody decided to buy a Honda Pilot on the same day that we did, right? I mean, really. So the same thing happens with every component of our lives. All of a sudden, we change our filters. And so we're constantly changing our filters, and we're constantly adapting our hidden biases. And so that's why diversity training such as this is really important, because it kind of helps change that lens.
Do you think that might be part of the evolutionary process too? We survive because we can adapt and use that filter?
Exactly. Yeah. So Roger said we survived because we can adapt and use that filter. If we weren't able to recognize an enemy from the first round of war, the second time around, then we would just be in this perpetual cycle and eventually have, gone extinct. But instead, we were able to adapt and recognize the enemy, and hopefully recognize them further and further out in their tactics, etc.
I think we go insane because with that overstimulation, I mean, we're sitting on a chair, our clothes are touching us, all these different things, and it's like we just filter it out.
Well, and that's what autism is, right? It's Autism Awareness Month, so there you go. So autistic individuals, they perceive a lot more stimuli than the average individual. And so that's what kind of drives them, really, and makes it hard for them to focus on a particular event or action. Yeah. All right, so we inherently do what feels safe. There's that human evolution component. If I'm driving and I kind of feel a headache coming on and I know I may not be at my best, and I know that Highway 64 is ridiculous at this time of day, I may decide to take the back roads instead because I'm going to feel more comfortable doing that. And that may not be a logical decision I make, I just may decide to do that. I turn right instead of left and don't realize why but that's really why. So we inherently do what feels safe. We also flock to who is likable. So humans in general, tend to feel more comfortable around individuals who are more like us. So I talked about my story from when I moved to northern Wisconsin. All of those people looked like me, but I didn't feel like they were like me, right? I didn't feel comfortable around them. And so that likability can be on any number of diverse traits. I was really looking for someone who I felt comfortable having a conversation with. And because of my background and experiences, it was much more difficult for me to find that individual in that particular population subset. So we flock to who's likable. There's a whole slew of theoretical foundation for this. Freud's theory of transference, social demography theories, or social identity theory and relational demography theories. If you want to talk about the theoretical foundation, we can do that afterwards. For those that have no interest, I'm not going to bore you with that right now. But there's an entire theoretical foundation for that. So we tend to flock to who's likable. We're going to dig more deeply into that in a minute. And then we focus on who is valuable and competent. So this is particularly in the workplace. When we're making a hiring decision, we don't sit there and go, well, Susie had 5% more productivity than John. So therefore, we're automatically going to hire Susie, right? We tend to look at a lot more traits than just productivity. We look at who we feel is more valuable to the organization and who's going to be competent in that position. And we hire based on those subjective decisions much more so than the objective productivity levels. So we focus on who is valuable and competent. More on the difficulty of diversity. So in particular, although there can be many positive things, right, there's a lot more specific information about inherent bias and diversity that can have a negative effect. And one of those is a phenomenon known as misrecognition. So misrecognition is defined as the assumption that individuals who possess certain traits are seen to have higher social, political, ethical, intellectual, business clout than those who do not possess the same traits. And I actually really liked this picture. I've never seen this show. Does anybody watch it?
I saw the first season of it.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never seen it. But immediately when I saw this picture, I'm like, oh, that's perfect for this presentation because he looks like a boss, right? And my stereotype of who a boss is, and I'm not talking about a leader, I'm talking about a boss. That's it. He's probably 6'2" or taller, right? So he, in my mind, is seen to have higher business clout than individuals that do not look like him. And that's known as misrecognition. So what does this really mean? Well, because of misrecognition, individuals are found to be of lesser caliber than others in organizations. So that's not necessarily good. They may actually be much more technically competent than an individual that possesses different traits, but people may feel like the other individual is more competent. So for example, when I was doing research on misrecognition, I had, through interviews, an example come up where there was a manager who had just recently been promoted from a team where everybody was equal. They were all subject matter experts, and this manager was promoted. He spoke English fluently. This was in a multilingual organization, a multinational corporation. He spoke English fluently, and that's one of the reasons why he was promoted to the position of manager. for more effective communication. Well, he actually felt like he himself was of lesser caliber than his counterparts that he was now in charge of. He was less technically capable than them. So the individuals, when they came into his office to report to him, he spoke only in English to them because he knew that that was his one piece of power over them, was his ability to communicate better in the organizational language. And so he would constantly speak only English, even though they could have had a much more efficient communication in another language. Because that was his way of saying he was more competent. So that creates a lot of power struggles. And then, so employees lose out on jobs. Right? They lose out on professional development opportunities and other career progressing opportunities because they may be seen to be less capable than others that are not. Or others that do not have the same traits, I should say. So why does this matter? This is really the meat and potatoes of this. Well, certain positions, like I just talked about, must be filled with traits other than technical expertise. You have to fill leadership positions with someone who is capable of doing the leadership roles and responsibilities. So that doesn't necessarily equate to technical expertise. But again, just like my example said, it creates a power struggle. And then small groups are formed based on diversity traits. And this usually occurs due to misrecognition as well. There are power struggles between these small groups. People flock to like-minded people, or people flock to people with very similar diversity traits. And it creates these groups that feed off of each other for political and self-serving gains. And so you've got groups that are constantly at each other's throats. And if an individual is part of that group and has a decision that needs to be made, likely that decision is going to be for their best interests or the best interests of their small group rather than the best interests of the organization. And again, this came up in a lot of research, in my own personal research as well, where individuals make decisions based on self-serving actions and the self-serving actions of these groups rather than the best interests of the organization. But leaders can actually use that to their competitive advantage. If you can figure out a way to manage those groups, because they are always going to exist, but manage those groups so that they feed off each other in a positive, competitive nature, you can actually have a highly productive organization. All right. Now, I just gave you a whole bunch of kind of technical jargon and psychological phenomenons, blah, 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 blah. What the heck does that actually mean to you and talent development in particular? All right, let's get down to your takeaways in particular. Misrecognition is present in diverse organizations. In fact, really, it's present in all organizations because all organizations are diverse. Regardless of whether they visually look diverse, we were talking about when we talked about the 4 layers, they're diverse. There are going to be diverse traits everywhere. So misrecognition, hidden biases, the negative effects of diversity are always going to be present. And that really occurs because diversity is used to exert power. Connected via the internet, so we may have lost it all. There we go. Okay. However, these negative effects actually occur less frequently in technical organizations. And the reason for that is because technology, and Frankie, it sounds like you work in a technical organization, right?
I work for HP.
Okay, yeah, you work for HP. So there are a lot of teams and groups that speak their own language and do their own thing. I mean, that's just the way they are. Mark's nodding his head like, yes.
Technology is a language unto itself.
It is. It's its own separate language. So I did a case study on a very well-known multinational organization in the energy industry. And there are a bunch of geologists and geophysicists in the workplace that I studied in particular. And they were their own identity. I mean, completely separate. If anybody watches Big Bang Theory, right, Sheldon makes fun of geologists all the time. They really are. They're their own identity. They don't kind of fit into that scientist role. And my dad's one, so I can say it. But they speak their own language. They do their own thing. And that workplace was highly effective and efficient because of that. They just all got down to business. It didn't matter that everybody was from different locations around the world, that people spoke like 10 different primary languages. It didn't matter because they spoke one single language, and that was geology and geophysics. So it really does occur less frequently in highly technical workplaces. So if you're in one of those, you're lucky. You're going to have less of these problems. You're still going to have more of those problems in your human resources department, your finances department, the less technically focused departments. Okay, so what can we do about it? Well, we want to increase the value of diversity in our organizations. Gee, Erin, thanks. That doesn't mean much, right? So we want to train, we want to create policies, and we want to communicate expectations. And I left these on there because this was the outcome of my research when it came to diversity. I mean, really, the most effective organizations had very specified training programs specifically related to diversity. They had very strong diversity policies, and all of that was extremely well communicated. But this is the answer to what ails every organization, not just diversity, right?
Yet every organization has some type of diversity statement.
Right, it's true,
So
they do.
maybe it's not communicated,
But-
maybe the policies weren't there, maybe we didn't train our employees on diversity, but we got a diversity statement.
But you have a diversity statement. That's good. That's a good start. But really, you need all three of these working together in conjunction. But again, like I said, you could probably, any problem in an organization, not just diversity, you could probably go back and change these three things and it could fix the problem. So we're going to get into more specific details on that. So there are 9 tools that I'm going to leave you with. Number 1, learn to recognize and address unconscious bias in the workplace. And that starts with each of us individually. We need to discover what our own biases are. What are each of our own? If we understand what our own biases are, then we can better recognize bias and we can help stop bias in the workplace, the negative bias that occurs. And one of the ways we can do that is by using a tool. There it is. So this is the implied association test, the link to the implied association test, or the IAT. It was created by a group of researchers from Harvard, the University of Virginia, and the University of Washington. It's actually been around for just over 15 years, so you may have heard of it. You may have taken it in a grad school class. There are a lot of schools and universities that actually use it to help study organizational policies and procedures. And it's free, completely free. So you can go to implicit.harvard.edu/implicit, and you can take the test. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how long it takes you to answer each question. But it's a great tool to help you recognize your own bias, and you'll be shocked at the results. I guarantee you will be. I thought with my background, I was pretty, culturally adaptable. I still have hidden biases. Absolutely. So this is also something you can send out to any managers, supervisors in the workplace if you have a team that you work with, just as a form of training. So with that, customize your diversity training. I'm not a fan of pre-boxed training. I'm just not. Training is not adaptable to every organization. Every organization is a different size, has a different mission, vision, values, maybe a different industry. Those box trainings are not adaptable. And you can use them as a starting point, but then make sure everything aligns with your own mission, vision, values of your organization. And make sure it definitely aligns with your diversity policy, right? In your statement and your definition. Your employees will thank you for that because it's bad enough. I mean, how many employees drag their feet going to training every time, right? Great, I have to do this computer-based training, and all I'm going to do is sit there and click through these PowerPoint slides that I have to do every year, and they always say the same thing. If you customize it, and you make it interactive, and they feel like they're gaining value from it, they're going to be much more appreciative of actually having to go to training. All right, third, reframe your conversation on diversity. Don't focus on discrimination. That has a negative connotation to it. Instead, talk about fair treatment and respect. There's still going to be discrimination inherent in that, but you're going to be focusing on the positive aspects of it. And that really helps reframe your entire organization's view of diversity. So when you're creating your policies as well, your training, and you're communicating about diversity, make sure you're framing it in this positive way also. Then also use anonymous current and former employee surveys. So if you know you have issues with diversity, or if you suspect that you do, add a couple questions on diversity to your exit interviews. I bet you there are at least a couple people that felt like they were discriminated against or didn't have fair treatment during their time there. And that can really help you understand where your diversity issues may be in your organization. And you can use that data to customize your training. And offer a third-party complaint system. It's really difficult if you have a complaint against someone in your organization, you have to report it to your organization. A lot of people are much less likely to report. Use a third-party system, an anonymous option as well, and it can really help. And we're not responding again. Any questions on these 5 before I move on?
Just a comment on the fair treatment, the difference between treating people fairly and equally. There's a big difference. The example I give is I came from a union shop, and absenteeism was always an issue. It seemed like, but you would have people that played the system, and they knew exactly how many days they needed to be there before they could take an unexcused absence. And so, if a point comes where the person never took an absence but had to be off a few weeks because of a death in the family or whatever, you allow that to happen. That's treating them fairly.
Rather than
That's not,
equally.
and versus the person that played the game, if they had to be off, well, we can follow the rules now. So there's rules and the rules, the difference between treating people fairly and equally.
That's great. I really like that. Thank you, Roger. Okay. Number 6, initiate a resume study to determine equality. Now, when I first ran across this in research, I found this fascinating. I never would have thought of doing something like this. But anonymize your resumes of individuals that already work at your organization. And then have a diverse and trustworthy team sit down and take a look at them. And think about where they should be placed in the organization, how much money they should be making, and make sure that there are no names on there, that there are no statements on there that may relate to a diverse trait. And that could give you a good idea as to whether or not your hiring process and your leadership development program even is working successfully with regard to diversity. And support projects that encourage positive images of diversity. So one of the top ways to combat hidden biases is actually to create a positive image of everything that goes against those biases. So switch it from negative to positive. So put posters around that promote positive images of diversity. Put positive images of diversity in your newsletters. Send it out in emails. Use just those positive images, and research has shown that that in itself can be a huge combatant against negative hidden bias. And then identify, support, and collaborate with community programs that support diversity. What this means is if you have programs in place, for example, where you allow your employees to get a day off work to go volunteer, add an additional incentive for them to volunteer with a diverse community group within your community. So for example, the Urban League or an LGBT group. If you have someone who is huge in the LGBT community to begin with, encourage them to not go where they're comfortable. Encourage them to volunteer with the Urban League. Encourage them to do a project with the Urban League. We've got the National Society of Hispanic MBAs. That's a large community organization around here as well. That's a great one to do work with also. So find incentives to collaborate with those community programs. Do projects with them. Even just reach out to them and say, hey, what do you need from us? What can we offer you? And that really helps promote a positive diversity image. All right, finally, and this really could encompass everything that we've just talked about, undergo a formal diversity audit. Now, obviously, that's going to take a lot of time and resources. I know that not every organization is capable of that, but if you're really struggling with diversity or you want to start a solid diversity program, that's the way to do it. It incorporates all of these and more, and I would highly encourage you to do it with a third party because they'll give you the straight facts.
What is that? What is a
So a diversity audit is pretty much everything we talked about. You bring in either an internal consultant or an external consultant to say, hey, you want to build a diversity program or you want to revamp your diversity program? Let's do some 360 surveys. Let's do some
So they look at the
anonymous.
characteristics of your original wheel.
Exactly. So they'll look at the characteristics of the original wheel. They'll do maybe focus groups, 360 surveys, gather information about how your employees feel about diversity, whether they feel that they may have fair treatment or not, whether they feel like people are being hired into positions who don't deserve to be hired into positions, or whether they feel like there really is a strong diversity program and the teamwork that is involved really helps breed creativity. Then great, fantastic. But it really gathers all of that information and data and uses it to help create policies, procedures, training, and an effective communication plan with regard to diversity. You're welcome. Questions on that? Okay, questions, period. So hopefully, if you have a positive diversity climate, you'll be running off into the sunset to an engaged workplace, right? So, there you go. Mary, did I make you squirm in your seat enough?
Well, it brings up a question that I'm almost hesitant to ask.
Please.
And it's going to obviously show, there's no way I can disguise it, that it's not going to show some bias on my part. But are we today just too darn sensitive? I don't know how else to ask it.
No,
You know, are we
good
all
question.
walking around just expecting that somebody's going to offend us in some way? Or not? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I'm trying not to have a bias, but I do feel sometimes that's the case with some people that I have to associate with. And some of those are older. I mean, they're older white guys like me. And it's like, they're not picking on you because you're over 55. That's not it. It's because you're not doing your job, you know? I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that of a certain age, you know? And so I just wonder, what do the studies show about that? Are we too touchy?
We definitely are moving towards a much more touchy, is using the term you've stated, society. I mean, the studies do show that. We are focusing much more on being politically correct. Definitely.
I think the issue is we have really it's been in the education system all the way through for now quite a few years, which as it should be. However, there's kind of been a misrepresentation of the value. What you should really be getting out of it is this power of the diversity, the power of the positive, but it's taken more of me having an affront because you don't agree with me. Well, it's okay not to agree with you.
I completely agree.
But I think it's that misrepresentation. They seem to be the people get out of it what they want to get out of it. and not showing the value of the diversity and the value of the exchange of diverse ideas. It seems like sometimes they take it to the effect that my opinion is more valid than yours. It seems like the pendulum is kind of swung that way. To me, nothing excuses bad behavior. If you consider that, then that could really solve a lot of these hurt feelings, maybe.
I agree, and I think, Roger, it is a pendulum, just like you said. I think we were here, now we're moving to here, where we all have to be very politically correct, but we are at the peak. It'll go back down, and it'll level out.
I think that people make more of it than it is. There's nothing wrong with being sensitive to the people around us. That's actually a good human thing to do. But people make such a big deal of it because it makes them uncomfortable to be sensitive to the needs of other people around them. It is still a fact that women make 79 cents on the dollar. It is still a fact that I go into a predominantly male field to be in technology, and I have to fight to be heard in some cases. It doesn't matter that I have 2 master's degrees and that I am a technical expert in some fields. But simply because of the fact that I'm a woman, it becomes harder to say these things. Now, I do want the people in the room to be sensitive to that and realizing that they have those biases. So that when my daughter goes into the workplace, she's not going to be facing these struggles that I've had to face, which my mother faced more sharply than I did. So, I mean, I think that the media makes out of it more than it is. If you do hurt someone's feelings, you should care about that.
Yeah.
It's just human.
Yeah. I do workshops on business etiquette and protocols. So,
but
I'm all about
I know.
not hurting people's feelings. I just wonder, sometimes.
Well, that pendulum will swing back down and we'll find a happy medium.
Yeah.
We will.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be much more sensitive and we'll understand the value of diversity much more. I think we will
just
get to
looking
that
around
point.
the room, when I see people like yourself here and Erin, that's going to help that pendulum.
Thank you.
It wasn't easy to have tattoos in corporate America. Nobody cares now.
But